autonomous organizations. Just a little bit about myself. I see that we are streaming live on Facebook, so we do have participants in the audience as well as streaming live on Facebook. But a little bit about myself. My name is Graeme Fox. I will be moderating this panel that we have here today. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Societal, which is building its own blockchain for the creation and management of DAOs, or decentralized communities in general. We're gathered here today by an excellent panel that is very experienced and very knowledgeable in all things about DAOs, coming from very different walks of life from DAOs, and we'll have a very unique perspective. So I guess just to kick it off, I was wondering if we could get you guys to go all around the circle and introduce yourself to the audience and say a little bit about your background and what DAOs you've kind of been a part of.
Sure, I'll kick us off. My name's Justice Conder. My background is really as a developer in doing stuff with startups, and then into enterprise IT in the form of like team management through Agile, Kanban, Scrum. So it's like another level of abstraction of programming. That's the way I saw it, right? And then I fell down the DAO rabbit hole pretty hard with the launch of Bankless DAO, which is really not that long ago, but I went full obsession mode, which means that's the only thing I've thought about for the past like year and a half, 2 years. Okay. And then recently I've started full-time directly with Polygon Labs to do DAO ecosystem development.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Deepa. I'm a social entrepreneur. I've worked with Salesforce Foundation before, managed their philanthropy, and I had a publication before getting into Web3, just profiling social entrepreneurs using technology to do good. And I got into Web3 when Vitalik Buterin made this $1 billion worth Shiba coin donation to Crypto Relief Fund in India. And I was like, wow, what is this? Can this money do anything? Like, it's like this magic internet money. Can it actually buy oxygen cylinders? Because that was the need, and the money was donated for providing relief during COVID outbreak. And I just started tracking that campaign, and that's how I entered into crypto. And with Ukraine DAO, that happened a year ago on February 24th, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion on Ukraine. There's a DAO that came together on Twitter. They literally unfolded on Twitter. In 5 days, they raised $7 million, and they transferred it to the Ukrainians who were, suddenly thrown into this. And so that was amazing. And that was my entry point into DAOs. And I just went down the DAO rabbit hole through that. And I wanted to understand how DAOs can be used, or this model can be used to do real world good, people gathering on the internet for real world impact. And that's been my focus since then. I founded Impact DAO Media, which is kind of like Bankless DAO, but we elevate the stories exclusively of DAOs that are making impact, so positive social change.
Awesome. I guess I'll go next. So I'm currently the COO and head of governance at DELV, formerly known as Element Finance. And at Element, we basically began building a protocol for fixed and variable yield rates, or yield markets, where like you can basically buy crypto at a discount over course of maturity period, comes one-to-one with that asset, and you redeem it for that fixed rate. So while we were creating this protocol, we started looking at ways to basically turn into a DAO and have it govern itself. But we didn't really kind of like any of the solutions in the market with Compound's Governor Alpha or Open Zeppelin's solution. So we built a governance system in-house called Council, which is basically a very simple modular framework where you have one core voting contract, and then you can kind of tack governance Legos on top of to meet your use case. So that was kind of our, at least, endeavor into the world of DAOs. But before building DELV and Element Finance, I was at the Maker Foundation as a governance architect, building their MIPS framework and some of the core contracts there. And I was actually one of the first people onboarded to the DAO as elected by the MKR holders to help with governance, building, and facilitation. And yeah, previously I was just been involved in the Ethereum ecosystem, contributing to like helping the EIP process and coordinating hard forks and advising on Ethereum.org for the past 4 or 5 years. So I've definitely been ingrained in Ethereum for a long time. And I'm very curious about the DAO landscapes around like other areas such as societal and also Polygon. So really excited for this convo today.
That's great. I'll go next. I'm Shannon. During my day job, I'm a managing director of a charity that I co-founded in Calgary called the Design Talks Institute. We host conversations about art and architecture, design, and the built environment. My degree actually is kinesiology. So I'm always very aware of how people move through space and place, and always curious about how people's environments affect their well-being and how they interact with those spaces. And so my work with Design Talks has taken me kind of in many directions, learning about that. But my background and my love has always been deep in sports. Played sports my whole life, worked for the university women's basketball, soccer teams as a sport therapist, and then worked outside of my career too, just with many sports teams. So when I was going into the NFT space, actually, that's what drew me in. When I heard about Christie's and Beeple, I thought that there was a reason to start paying attention to NFTs. I thought if a major auction house like that was considering it, that I wanted to learn about it. And we work with a lot of artists with Design Talks, so I wanted to be able to at least have some knowledge about it if they were asking me questions. And so once I started learning about NFTs, it was during the bull market, and it was a bit terrifying, to be honest, in that time. I learned a lot. But we really started settling into DAOs, and with my work in the charitable giving space, it really felt very aligned with what I was interested in doing. So I started looking into Seed Club and some of the DAOs that were kind of well known at the time. And Krause House DAO was one of the DAOs that was kind of one of the OGs and most familiar. And so I was learning more about Krause House, and I entered into their ecosystem. And with my design background, they brought me in right away on a project in New York at NFT NYC, where we popped up. We fabricated a court, wrapped it with 23 artists from around the world with their art, popped it up at Classic Club Car Manhattan, and ran a 3-on-3 basketball tournament on it during NFT NYC. And so I was part of that experiences team, and that was pretty rad. And that's opened my my world to basketball, to Krause House, to the opportunity of community owning a minority stake in an NBA team, which at once seemed like a very altruistic goal, but seems to be getting closer every day.
Perfect. Thank you very much for all of your backgrounds. A very diverse group of people that we have here from all different types of DAOs. So this will definitely be an interesting chat. I guess to just really, kick it off and to jump right into it, I want to start off the conversation about, what is a DAO and what is a decentralized autonomous organization. I feel like the term, especially these days, has, it's thrown around for a lot of different reasons, a lot of different use cases, a lot of different meanings, and everything is kind of labeled with that DAO term or terminology. So we can go around, and if you could say a little bit about what you think a DAO is and what a DAO means to you. And feel free to jump in.
We'll take the same order.
Let's do the same. Yeah, let's do the same
Okay.
order. Exactly.
Okay, so definitely a hot question. Okay, and there's the meme-worthy answer, and then there's everything in between, right? I like. I'll give 3 levels. The first is I'll say it's a decentralized program that coordinates human actions and decisions with incentives. Another simpler way would be like collective management. As soon as you say like 5 people can manage a digital resource, how do those decisions get made, right? Then you enter into the DAO territory. Or the most simplest description I've heard, which I kind of like, is account abstraction, whereas many people speak as one voice. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I'll share on behalf of Impact DAOs because they have a different focus, and people who form DAOs around impact, they align for meaning over money, and so they operate differently. But essentially, DAOs are internet native organizations, people gathering on the internet around a shared purpose, and managing resources in a decentralized fashion. The autonomous part in Impact DAOs don't show up as fully as in the sense DeFi DAOs operate, where everything is on chain and it's trustless and permissionless. Like Impact DAOs have a different philosophy of operating. But autonomous, what it stands in the case of Impact DAOs is being sovereign, being free, not being able to shut down. And I can give you an example of Ukraine DAO. So when Ukraine DAO was fundraising for Ukraine, they didn't face any interruptions, while another nonprofit fundraising on Patreon was shut down. The fundraising campaign was shut down because they said they're raising funds for Ukraine and the army, but at that point of time, everybody in Ukraine had to pick up arms. So while Ukraine DAO continued to fundraise and did an excellent job.
Oh, I guess that's me. Yeah, I mean, there's no one way to describe what a DAO is, I think, and that makes the answer a lot more difficult to give. But my personal favorite definition is more relating DAOs to being on-chain organizations. And it does really depend on the use case, but by calling it an on-chain organization, that really does include it being everything tracked and decisions are made on chain. Everything is kind of memorized or ingrained in the actual logic of the blockchain forever. So I think a lot of social proposals and doing off-chain stuff doesn't really work because there's no way to enforce that. I can get into that later, but I prefer the idea of a DAO being an on-chain organization. I don't really think there's a whole lot of use cases for things that don't use that on-chain aspect. Yes, you can use off-chain tools and ways to coordinate or basically signal decisions. But overall, I think a DAO is basically a community-led organization or entity. Practically speaking, it does have some central authorities in there, but ideally it would be completely decentralized and controlled by that community, whether it's token holders or people with voting power through NFTs. But yeah, I think it's an on-chain organization that's community-led is the simplest answer from my perspective.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think everyone's kind of summed it up quite clearly. I think that from the way that we're looking at it is really that the community collectively decides on what it wants to engage with. So when proposals or things come forward to the DAO, whether it's a good proposal or not isn't necessarily up to the stewards of the DAO. It's whether the community decides to engage with it enough to make it a worthy proposal and go through and be passed. And I think that those types of abilities for community to engage at such a very basic level is a new opportunity for the way that businesses run.
Perfect. No, thank you for that. I think, yeah, what you guys were all touching about is see the different definitions almost coming out for DAOs, so internet native organizations, on-chain organizations. We're trying at societal, trying to use decentralized communities because, you really see DAOs being so many different stages in their life cycle between small groups of 5 people, like Justice was talking about, that are trying to make a decision about some resources, to the DAO that Charles was working on, MakerDAO, having 10,000 token holders, and massive organization with different sub organizations within that DAO, right, and trying to all make decisions. So you definitely see different terminology flown around for it, from internet organization to decentralized communities, and all kind of just trying to touch on maybe the same thing that we're broadly stroke with the term DAO, but maybe using a different label for it for its different stage now, and actually started breaking out into that. So I guess going to the next point, this is a good transition into maybe what are some more types of DAOs. And you guys all gave a little bit of background about the DAOs that you're a part of, but maybe we could touch on like other different types and what are the use cases for them. I know from like there's governance-based ones for like protocol DAOs, service DAOs, social DAOs, media DAOs, to like investment-based DAOs. So maybe if each one of you could either give a little bit more description about what the DAO you're a part of and maybe like the type of DAO it is, or if you feel like you've already described a lot about it, then maybe a DAO that you're interested in. And we'll go in the opposite direction. So Shannon, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, I think that when you're speaking about a DAO, the DAO has kind of transitioned, I think, from what it was, even from what I knew in early, what I would call early days to what it is now. And so it was that you would see DAOs kind of raise a bunch of money through an NFT sale, and then they'd have a way to try and figure out governance of what to do with that money and how to allocate the funds and how to operate underneath of that mold. And I think what you see more and more now is people coming in with a much clearer intention of, okay, this is how I want to approach a DAO. I have a very specific use case for how I want to raise this money, how I want to activate my community, and have more of a call to action, very, very clear intentions. And I think that those things are helping kind of demystify a little bit what DAOs may have the opportunity to do versus what they weren't able to do in the past. All in for Sport is a really good example of that. We're working with a group called Super Benefit DAO, and they're helping us with our early governance structure of having kind of these cells that we're developing initially that kind of come organically through experimentation within the community, where people are like, well, we should create this, and then that cell will spin up, and then from that cell there's an opportunity for fractals in other areas to spin off as well. So it's creating this opportunity for more growth and more organic growth where it needs to grow. And I think the thing that I've learned most about DAOs in terms of, the structure of them or the purpose of them or the type of DAO is that, it's a little bit ambiguous. And so for us, we're trying to make the decentralized opportunity move through us first. So what is decentralization? What does that mean? And then how can you create a system to work towards that? So that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. I think just like the biggest thing is these organizations having a purpose and a set purpose when they start about what they want to do, and you can be anything really, right? Is what we've kind of come to see. But you just start off with a purpose and a mission, and then you gain people and interest behind that mission. People join onto you. But Charles, I'll let you continue.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, definitely don't start a DAO for the sake of starting a DAO. I would definitely give that advice, unless you're testing it. But yeah, the DAO I was previously involved with was MakerDAO, which governed the stablecoin system. And on a similar note, the DAO that I'm currently a part of or most active in is Element DAO, which governs the Element protocol, which is that like open source fixed rate protocol that I talked about. So in both cases, these DAOs are created to govern a protocol. So a protocol is essentially a group of like smart contracts put together for a business use case. So in Maker's situation, they created this smart contract system that allows people to put up crypto as collateral and draw a stable coin that's pegged to the US dollar. So they can go and do things with that and then pay it back their debt over time. Makes it very like good for like capital efficiency if you want to keep that collateral and hold it there. On the Element side, it's governing that like software. So that means like all token holders or people with voting power have the ability to upgrade that protocol. So upgrading the smart contracts to maybe add a new feature or improve something that was a little weak in the past, or even upgrading their current governance system. So both these DAOs are definitely in that category of they're governing a piece of software that's open to the world, and they are in the decision-making. Basically, you can kind of compare it to a like shareholder vote, in that everyone who has that token there has a say in the future of the software. Whether they agree or disagree is definitely one of the bigger problems in the DAO, but this type of DAO is definitely for just managing software. And one thing I did want to note, like, which is kind of a mix of one of the questions I saw in the chat, is that a unique thing about DAOs in general, I find that I always like to share, is that typically in like Web 2 or like traditional technology, you have early contributors or founders come together, they build a product in a business, they have the ability to maybe one day go and do an IPO and kind of spread out the power of governance to the shareholders, but also the revenues. They could also get acquired or do a merger. But with a DAO, it really allows the core product and team to decentralize early on and share that future vision with a grouping of people who actually care as well. And they ultimately are the ones who guide and push that forward. Kind of be like Nike kind of pushing their product to the open and allowing all the users and customers to help shape the direction of new things. So obviously that comes with pros and cons, but it is a definitely unique thing that comes with DAOs early on in the like maturity of a product or service. So yeah, I'll leave it there and pass it on.
Yeah, I really love what Charles said about sharing power early on and sharing future prospects with people who are really in tune with your product, and other users. So as Impact Our Media, we research DAOs that are specifically formed to do good. So DAOs whose core purpose is to do good to the people and planet and improve people's lives. And as part of our research, we've identified 5 types of impact DAOs that exist. One is obviously around financial inclusion. So DAOs, for instance, protocol DAOs could be like Proof of Humanity, a Good Dollar, or impact market that's around unconditional basic income. So they're using a decentralized manner to distribute free money to people in emerging markets, for instance. And impact market, one of the DAOs even reaches places where it's impossible for aid workers to be there. For instance, Afghanistan or refugee camps, it's just hard, but people there have phones and they can do direct, a UBI transfer in their crypto wallets. So those are one kind of DAOs. Then we have climate DAOs, so DAOs that are formed around, climate mitigation. So, and within that, there are many types, like there could be agriculture DAO. This is a great example that I like to give of coconut DAO. They're based in Dominican Republic. There are these coconut plantations, smallholder farmers, and to preserve those plantations, this guy from Dominican Republic started a DAO to mobilize global coordination, literally, like people globally can buy a share of the plantation and, fundraise and then preserve that, use that money to preserve agriculture and, just coconut plantation. Otherwise, there's so much demand for coffee and cocoa from Dominican Republic that coconuts sometimes those plantations are taken over. So that's another great example. We also have network state DAOs. So this is like a really new type of DAOs, which Balaji has written a book. He was the former CTO of Coinbase, called The Network State, where he believes in the future, like we will form countries on the internet that will be smart contract enabled. But to reach that stage, you start as a DAO, like you start as highly aligned communities. And that's the very first stage of a network state and network state. And so there are DAOs that are experimenting in the network state category, and they're part of impact DAOs. We're part of our research. We recently studied Kift DAO, which is like an amazing DAO, which is redefining the future of cities, living and work. It's a highly aligned community that loves to travel and work from anywhere as a community, so they call themselves nomad communities, and they are in the process of buying land, putting it on chain. So they have a whole vision around it. And also DAOs in the category of decentralized science fall under impact DAOs, because they are decentralizing, scientific study, research, publishing, just incubation, and just bringing it to market, So it's a very exciting category, and there are broad applications. And we also have Gitcoin. So we call them the enabler DAOs because they're not directly delivering impact, but they're enabling impact. So it's the most popular Web3 crowdfunding platform. Anybody can go and fundraise there. If you qualify for any of their categories, which is mostly around open source projects and climate projects and around meta crisis. And so these DAOs are enabling impact, and they are not necessarily involved in delivering impact. So Gitcoin falls in that category.
Cool. I'll say this. What's unique about this situation, pre-DAO, post-DAO, is pre-DAO, if you believed in something and wanted to be a part of it online, how do you do it? You send some stranger PayPal and hope for the best. The reason why this unlocks a whole different future is collective management. I can send money to some cause and then have assurances, not based upon a character, someone's word, not even a legal contract, but by math, that I have a say in what I've contributed. And so I think there's a cool way to kind of create a taxonomy of all the different DAOs simply by asking, are they pooling or unpooling? Okay, and you can pool three things. You can pool money. If you pool money, you can use it to invest. This was like for one of the first generations of DAOs, investment DAOs, right? You can buy something, that's a collector DAO, or you can build something. Hey, we have a vision, we want this thing to exist. Let's all put our money together and let's make it happen, right? So that's pooling money. Two, you could pool talent. If you get a bunch of people together who have a certain skill set, this produces your service DAOs. We're basically going to be our own kind of agency, right? Or you can pool vibes, which is the social DAO, aka the tokenized economies. Now, these are a little tricky, right? Because you're like, well, a lot of social DAOs don't have on-chain governance. They don't have a rigorous, but here's the trick. If you're a holder of the token, why would you do something that hurt the community? Because you'd be hurting yourself. So it creates a kind of social contract with that token, right? So that's pooling. And now the unpooling is your DAO unpooling vulnerabilities to prevent capture. And this is where it comes into the DeFi place of like, you don't, well, I was going to say, you don't have to be worried that the bank's going to run off with your money, but it's 2023, so I won't say that. But can you have some assurance that you're putting your money into this DeFi protocol? Someone's just going to like have a bad day and run away with the money. It's like, hey, we've designed such a resiliency. We've de-risked this thing at a protocol level through a DAO. And so like, no one bad actor can destroy it from inside or outside. So I like that pooling and unpooling way to think about like the whole system,
Oh yeah, that is great. I think, it's like you guys have brought up so many different types of DAOs. It's crazy to see them, all from like social clubs, like Friends with Benefits. That's like a massive DAO, and this high social club status thing to get into, to investment DAOs. That just invest in on-chain assets, to actual protocols and running organizations and like projects essentially on-chain. So I guess the next thing that we want to touch about is we talk about all these great DAOs, but like, how do you actually get into one of these DAOs, and how do you actually join one of these DAOs? Like maybe you could either touch on like, where do you find these DAOs that you guys are talking about? Like if I'm just getting into Web3, where would I even go look? And then how would I actually join it? Does your DAO have a token that I buy, or is it pre-token? And maybe you guys can touch a little bit on where to find DAOs and how to actually join these DAOs. And Justice, we'll start off with you.
Sure. I'll say this because there's a strong perception that the dominant pattern of joining a DAO today is the way it works with all of them, which basically is go to the open market, buy some token or NFT, use that to enter a gated community, go through some onboarding process, usually automated, and then just kind of get involved and get in where you fit in and try to make an impact. And if you observe some sort of need, then you've established enough rapport or whatever, you can make a proposal and say, hey, I want to do this thing. We're all going to benefit and I want some money to do it. And that's basically the pattern, right? But there's also another very awesome path for DAOing, which is demonstrated in DAO House and Moloch DAO, which it is permissioned, and the governance is not traded on an open market. And so the idea is there, you actually have to make a proposal to say, I would like to be a member of this. And there may be even different levels of shares where the one entitles you to governance rights and the other is purely a financial claim. And so there's the most popular way: buy whatever the threshold is for entrance and start to get involved, or actually apply, maybe even make tribute. Some of these will say, hey, you need to put up 25 ETH to show incentive alignment, or we're not accepting any more members, but we are accepting a financial interest. And they're both extremely important. And it's common to kind of denigrate the permission DAOs, when in fact, though, they're very useful because this prevents governance attacks and plutocracy. Someone could just go buy 51% and literally just run it. Talk about buying votes. It's easier to buy votes in DAOs than there ever was in politics. So both of them are very useful.
For Impact DAOs, we've, as Impact DAO Media, we've collated, we have about 100 Impact DAOs that we've reviewed their mission statements and have, proper knowledge of, and they are cataloged on our website. It's impactdaos.xyz with their Twitter handles. And I think that best way to start contributing or to even enter the world of DAOs is to be on Twitter, because that's where everybody gathers. And then from their Twitter handle, make a way into the Discord. I think that's their office on the internet. Like that's where they all gather, and just absorb the vibes. You don't have to initially like jump in and say, hey, I really like your mission and I want to contribute. You can just be on the sidelines observing the vibe, the culture. I think that's the beautiful part of DAOs, because everything is done in public. Everything is kind of, on these platforms where you can join and just sit on the sidelines till the time you're ready. And when you're ready, you can start contributing, take up a bounty. Like generally, everything is task-based, like at least in the case of Impact DAOs, and then make your way in if you really like it. Like the ones that have tokens, you can start holding their tokens, participate in governance. So you can take your time before joining these organizations. I think that's one very beautiful part of it, because with other organizations, like traditional organizations, you don't know really what's going on inside. Like you may go through the entire process of interviews and everything, only to know that how toxic the culture is. So I think it's very important to find that fit. And you can sense that by being part of the Discord and just being part of the community and doing some couple tasks before you finally, want to participate in the governance or be full-time employed with them.
Yeah, 100%. Like as it relates to Krause House, our Discord is open for sure. And the thing that has been really remarkable to watch grow is, like I said, it was an idea of, oh, we'd like to buy a minority stake in an NBA team. And people thought that was quite audacious. But, when you look at what the research that we're doing towards, like, what is the future of sport? What is the future of fan engagement? What is the opportunity? It really actually is resonating quite well with ownership groups, that if we have a community of 5,000 plus people of just pure basketball fanatics who do statistical analysis, who do content, who do streaming, that's a large community that we have of hoop fanatics that can really benefit an ownership group as part of that cap table. So, what was, maybe once audacious is actually, when you see the things that are happening with the purchase of, other professional sports teams, WAGMI United, for example, is a soccer team that was purchased by a DAO. And you see more and more kind of developing every day. It really is this new opportunity for ownership through community. And so, with Krause House, for example, like I said, you can enter through the DAO if you want to participate in governance and voting and those types of things. It is token gated, but we always welcome hoop fanatics to come in and explore and get to know us.
I'll piggyback on basically everyone and what they said, but I think the D in DAO basically, it stands for decentralization, but although it can mean quite a few things, it does mean that it's open to anyone. And I think my advice for anyone who wants to join a DAO or is considering it is go after your passion, do your research, how an industry like really interests you around like NFTs, DeFi, impact DAOs and all of that, like go and find the thing that actually like meets your calling. And from there, you'll basically integrate yourself with the community. And many DAOs have open bounties to kind of take on new tasks and try things out. Beautiful thing about a DAO is that you're not necessarily always locked in like a full-time job. Like you can do one-off tasks to kind of show your contribution, or do something that you're really passionate about, and then take that to the finish line, and then kind of take a break for a bit and then come back if you have something else. But in general, like the blockchain and crypto ecosystem is so welcoming and friendly. Like we always want people to join in. It's all open source code as well. If you're a developer, you can kind of check out all the GitHub repos and dig in there. So yeah, I mean, my advice is just like follow your passion and talk to people, and you'll probably find a job out of it.
And that kind of piggybacks a bit too, like on what the future of work could be. And there has been a lot of question about whether DAOs are the future of work, because like you were saying, you can experiment in these communities, you can learn, you can meet new people that you wouldn't have ever, been able to meet before. And then you can get on work streams through different things where you're kind of following your passion and your interests. So it's this really exciting opportunity that, I've come across. I think all of you have come across as well, working in this space.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys are saying following your passion, that like makes work fun, right? Like you want to work there and you want to be a part of it because you're engaged and you like what you're doing. And just being able to join an organization by purchasing their token or being an active contributor means a lot, instead of trying to go through like an interview process and trying to get a part of these closed off companies, and you don't actually know what the company's like before you actually join it. Whereas DAOs are always building out in the open, and you can actually see what's going on. Like Deepa said, you can read through the Discord, you can read through the community, and actually see and make sure that you like what's actually happening, and this is the right community for you to join, and this is where you want to kind of set your roots and spend your time. But yeah, no, thanks for that. I guess the big thing is, I guess, if you want to join a DAO, you're most of the time have to go purchase a token. Requires you to set up a wallet, a crypto wallet. We won't get into how you actually do that in this call, but get on crypto Twitter, and you're probably going to need a Discord account. That seems to be where most DAOs actually communicate and talk these days in this Web3 world. And there's some good websites like DeepDAO is like a good website that collects all different types of DAOs and has it on there. You can search for what type of DAO you're actually looking for, or crypto Twitter is always a good place to do it. But I guess moving on, so now you've actually purchased a token, you're a part of a DAO. Maybe we can touch on what are some of the benefits and challenges that actually comes with working in a DAO, and how it kind of compares to a traditional organization that we'd all think about going and getting a job. And Charles, we'll start off with you here.
Oh, that's if you ask me this tomorrow, I probably have a different answer. There, like in terms of benefits, I kind of touched on it a bit, and that is you can kind of try things out. Like you can be a part of multiple DAOs. It's more of like that fractional job type style, where like you can go and do some, like you could be a developer in one DAO, or you could be a community coordinator, and you can go and do something completely different in another one. It really gives you that like flexibility to follow what you like doing, and not necessarily like pigeonhole yourself every day into the same like routine, which works well for a lot of personalities. Some people don't like that. So that's why it could be a benefit or not. I think the biggest con, which I'll like nail right on the head right now, is the coordination is not as efficient as a traditional organization. Because many DAOs don't necessarily have those traditional hierarchies where like manager, employee, like et cetera, it does get hard to coordinate and make decisions when it's a flat organization and there's not like leaders. However, like natural selection always happens, like leaders emerge in DAOs, and like there is kind of definitely more of a trickle effect. But if you're looking for like a very like structured organization, not many DAOs have that. And I think that is one problem that a lot of organizations need to solve before DAOs become mainstream, is how do we operate? How do we pay people? How do we like protect ourselves legally? There's like a huge amount of things that need to be solved for DAOs. So if you like experimenting, definitely a benefit as well, like, because there's so many things to touch on in the world of DAOs. Like we're only scratching the surface here. So yeah, I mean, I can list a bunch of things, but I'm curious to hear everyone else and what they think.
I'll I'll say this, like, I remember the day when it dawned on me that what I was doing wasn't anything different than just contractor work. And I was like, I'm living in the future. And then it hit me and I was like, how is this, but with far less organized and chaotic and stuff. And so I say this, I try to get my wife involved in DAOs, set up her wallet, sent her 35,000 bank. I was like, hey, she's like, who do I talk to? What's the onboarding experience? So like at the HR, she wants like a standard IT enterprise, whatever. She's a developer, She's like, this is busted. I'm out of here. And so she has no sympathies for me when I tell her, like, complain to her about this or that. And she's like, I tell you, she don't believe it at all. Right. So I'll say this, from the standpoint of wanting to live in the future, that's why I'm here. Right. It's like trying to mess around with MP3s long before the iPod. Okay. If you want to be pressing into the future and develop a skill set and understand what what the technological singularity is bringing, then awesome, be here, right? But if you're looking for in predictability, stability, any type of normal patterns of that, I say, listen, just dip in part-time and learn and stuff. I don't, it's kind of like people who have no native interest in software development. I said, you don't have an interest, don't pick it up as a career, man, because you got to be here because you like really want to be here. So that's my.
They were kind of in that period of like a test flight app before the actual.
See, that's a great example.
Yeah, the way we describe impact DAOs is that they are the future of organizing for causes. That it's much more easier to meet people on the internet than to meet people in real life. And then you can tap in resources from everywhere, all around the world. Like by design, you are an internet first organization. You're not a tech company that's gone remote. It's not an afterthought. It is by design, you are an internet native organization. So if you want, and the future is internet, like we've known that, but still like our work hasn't evolved. Like our education also didn't evolve with that, right? Like it was only during COVID that everybody was like, oh, meet the future. Now we're all working on the internet, right? We are all collaborating on the internet. And a lot of them didn't want to go back to work after that because they saw the flexibility it gives you, of working from home, working from anywhere. It is just, it's the future, but not everybody has embraced the future. So our goal is to really get on board people onto this future. I think one of the challenging part is to figure out effective decentralized collaboration. What is the DNA for that? Because if you decentralize too much, there's a chaos, like work doesn't get done. We are not a social DAO, we're not a club, impact DAOs are people organizing around causes to make real world impact. And so the work needs to get done. And so how should we structure ourselves that we are decentralized enough? At the same time, we're getting work done. So if a little bit of more seriousness around just vibe-based communities, like a bit about getting work done on the internet. That's the goal. That's the future of work. And so also like not to confuse decision making with voting. A lot of time people associate DAOs with voting. The moment they say DAOs, they're like, oh, or you say voting, like the community's voting, they're like, oh, that's a DAO. But decision making is just a lot of not every decision should be put up for vote. And we've had like Klima DAO, which was a fork of Compound. They moved carbon credits on chain, and also Proof of Humanity, which was around identity and UBI together. Like they've had difficult time with their voting. Like what they realized is that even after delegate voting and everything, inviting the community to vote every time for decisions that they don't understand that they're taking vote on really is not very helpful. And so they're going to be finding a middle path, so they're not going to be like, voting is still going to be there, but they're not going to put every decision for voting. They will put decisions in different buckets, probably. Like this one goes for the entire community to vote on, and this one is for the operational team to vote on. And so just finding that middle, the balance between, extreme decentralization or democracy, because we know democracies also are bureaucratic, like you just add more processes to everything. So I think that's the challenge, just figuring out that sweet spot of decentralization and effectiveness.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think that, for Krause and All In for Sport both, like we're still learning. I think that that's the thing, is that every day you're kind of learning something new about governance or how you want to move forward, or and especially with All In for Sport, we see the opportunity to help people at this very grassroots level in that impact space, and helping a bank, kind of help support the unbanked people throughout the world and communities. And so it's that there's the opportunity. And I feel like combining and working with so many amazing people that are in the space together is really how we're going to get there. It's not going to be just like one person's going to come up with that solution. They're going to be like, hey, we've got it. And now all the DAOs run the same way. I think that it's incrementally, like Justice said, we're kind of the first people building in this world, and we're learning as we go. And it's very organic. It's wins and losses, and but still, to me, incredibly exciting and definitely the future.
Yeah,
I think that like DAO. Oh, sorry, Graeme. I just want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Like a DAO in general, I don't think it should ever be just like one standard definition. Like it's so very use case dependent. And I mean, even going over to what Deepa said about like the governance structures, is sometimes a DAO could have a very like government body structure where like it's like a legislative system with different tiers, or it could be like an organization where there is like a board of directors that kind of executes decision making. Like for example, liquid democracy where everyone has a say in each vote makes no sense most of the time. It's completely like not scalable. So having like a representative democracy might work, where there's like a council that actually is elected by the people and they make the decisions to push things forward. It's just way more efficient that way. And that's actually one of the problems we solved with council, the governance protocol we built, is that you can kind of take these like pieces and build your own DAO based on your use case. So if you want a liquid democracy, go ahead, have delegation, go ahead. If you want to have a council at the top that pushes things forward and scales decision-making, you can add that there as well. So I think that is also a very exciting benefit of DAOs, is like you can customize your use case with technology, and it's just like brilliant.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's all dependent on the organization and what's best for the organization and the people within it, right? That's one of the things about, testing out a community before you join it and see what governance structure they actually use, because we're all trying to figure out this online mass coordination, problem, and using the tools that we have and making new tools as we actually do it. And this is one of the things that Societal, the company that I'm building, is trying to actually do. We actually implement many types of governance systems on our platform so that you can select the type of governance system, that's right for your community or your organization, all the way from being a small group of like 5 people, requires a very different coordination structure and governance structure than a group of 10,000 people, right? And also depending how much, money you're trying to handle and what problems you're solving, right? So I think this would be a good time to touch on the different types of governance systems that we do see in DAOs and what governance systems you guys use in your organizations. Because like from Societal's perspective, like on our platform, we have like 1 member, 1 vote systems for NFTs, to ownership weighted voting for, fungible tokens, to, sub DAO structures that have like, different essentially sub communities or sub organizations within an organization, to delegating, right? To actually, I purchase a token, but I don't have time to actually participate in the community organization. So I want to delegate my votes to, Charles, or, someone that I believe is a thought leader in the organization, and want them to make the decisions on my behalf. So maybe touch about what governance structure you guys are using in your organization. I know, Charles, you just kind of touched a little bit about on the system that you guys built. So maybe Justice, if you want to kick us off and see.
Listen, Charles is definitely the one to answer this one, but I will say the very popular is especially the either 1 token, 1 vote, maybe with an added kind of delegate element to it, right? That seems to be very popular. Me personally, I'm far more interested at this point of literally replicating corporate governance with like DAO tooling, which is like heresy to say, but Charles, you can lay out the whole history and the different options.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first on-chain governance system was from MakerDAO, and that was the 1 token, 1 vote. where you're essentially depositing your token into the voting contract to have a say. And I mean, although it's still robust today and works, there's definitely a lot of problems from that. So when a token like that is on the open market, it kind of leads to the potential of someone with a lot of money to scoop it all up and sway governance, like plutocracy, for lack of better terms. And that can cause a lot of attacks and takeovers. So what we learned from that is we basically want to have a way that a community can assign voting power to a specific use case. We built this thing called a voting vault, where it's essentially that, like, if you want to assign voting power to an NFT, you'd basically define the rules to do that. And you can change it through governance as well. Or if in the case of Maker, where you have to lock a token in a contract, there's a huge opportunity cost there, because you could go be doing stuff with that token. You could borrow against it, you could sell it, you could do all these things. So you could also have your token in a borrow position or a lending position or an L, like liquidity provision, and still be able to delegate or vote. So I think the future of voting in DAOs isn't that one token, one vote. It's a voting system that has capital efficiency and basically makes the opportunity cost worth it as well. So I think, like, an ideal world, you'd have a voting system where there's ranked choice voting as well, because in a typical delegation system, let's say I choose Justice, and he's off on vacation with his wife, and he doesn't vote, he misses a really critical vote. In this case, it basically goes to my next choice and then the choice after that. So it makes sure that my voting power is included in each vote. Because as we all know here, I'm sure, is the participation in DAOs and voting is very minimal. And that's because people just don't want to vote all the time. So that is why delegation is popular. Anyway, I can ramble on about this for hours. So I'll pass it off to Deepa.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is my favorite topic, actually, governance and voting. And as part of our research, what we've seen is delegate voting is popular with impact DAOs. Proof of Humanity had 1 person, 1 vote, and they actually had a system to authenticate that it's a unique person, because that's what Proof of Humanity is, that they authenticate every person is unique. And so every unique person got a vote. And so they were running a perfect democracy. But what they figured, even with 1 person, 1 vote, delegate voting, that democracy didn't work, because people who are holding the token aren't sometimes interested in voting. They don't want to be part of your governance. You're pushing your governance down to them, but they don't want to be part of it. So they don't end up delegating their votes. And so there's low, participation in terms of delegating votes. What ends up happening is that those delegates then become pretty centralized in a way that you can accumulate power if you haven't put systems in place, like every 2 years we need to re-elect, or if they aren't paid. For instance, if if their services are voluntary, they might not put in enough time to study the proposals, and when you don't vote with proper context, you can get things like Brexit, right? Like, people just go and vote without having proper knowledge and context of the situation. So that's one. And we've seen DAOs with NFTs, like they assign NFTs the voting power, and they use quorum-based voting, like minimum threshold, like X number of people need to vote before a decision is passed. But what we recommend based on our research is merit-based layered governance system, and this is going to be, I think, with soul-bound tokens, which are non-transferable tokens, it's going to change DAO governance. People, it's not going to be based on affordability. At least in the case of impact DAOs, I can't talk about DeFi DAOs, but it's going to be based on merit, on your contribution, your time investment, and then you start decentralizing with people who are putting in, who have the skin in the game and who are really committed, and you decentralize with those folks by giving them the power to vote. And again, not taking every decision up for voting is layered or nested voting, like, treat decisions differently. Some decisions everybody can participate, but like maybe budget, everybody can participate on that. But on day-to-day operational decisions, It's the operating team, the team that is working on those problems every single day need to make those decisions. So you don't actually put up like, oh, what color should our logo be? Should it be red or blue? Let's take like 20,000 people's vote on it. And that was happening in Klimadao, by the way. So they've all had their horrid stories, and that's perfectly fine because we are all experimenting right now. And, the best part was everybody in the study was so generous. Like if you look here, the Proof of Humanity interviews, we've streamed them as podcasts. Like it is amazing. The CTO and the co-founders like talking about democracy at the end of it, like after living democracy for 1 year, as perfect democracy. They're like, no, we need to find a middle path. This doesn't work. So it's all great. I think governance will evolve, but for impact DAOs, definitely. And I just think it makes much more sense. Like it is merit-based rather than affordability, like not just because, and also like imagine, like we live in countries, like we don't put our passports on a decentralized exchange and say that, hey, now anybody can buy this passport and come and vote in our democracy. Like there's a way to, you need, even if you get a passport of a country, there's a whole system of onboarding you, so I think we should learn from the way countries are run and maybe take some good points from there.
Yeah, countries has definitely had a long experience, a long time period to learn and change their governance systems over time. But Shannon, quickly, I'll let you jump in and just talk about what governance system you guys use.
Yeah, we're using kind of the one token, one vote system as well. So I think that it's all kind of been discussed really quite thoroughly here. So I don't have much more to add.
Perfect.
I just throw out on this issue is typically a lot of times people say, well, what's the best governance? And that's almost starting from the wrong thing. It's like when you're 4 people, it's a certain pattern. When you're 40, it's a certain. And I think there's a new generation of DAO tooling coming out that is allowing for an evolution of change where the change in governance happens under governance. And so it's the snake eating its own tail. And that's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And just to be mindful of time, we want to wrap this up at the top of the hour. So one final quick question for you guys, and maybe it'd be like just one word, very quick, but what do we actually need to do to onboard the next 10 million people into DAOs? Like what needs to be fixed? What's the main challenge point that you guys see? And just really quickly, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think bringing the DAO narrative through mainstream media, I think would be helpful. Like mainstream mostly covers crypto and, they cover all the bad side of crypto, but DAOs are such an innovative use case of blockchain. And I think that if we can push more stories out of successful use cases, like that's what our purpose as Impact on Media is, also like elevate these stories. And we're working with like pretty, firms like TechSoup and all, which have always been the go-to channel for nonprofits to figure out what's the latest in technology to get the word out, like form those bridges with people who aren't part of the ecosystem yet. And I think mainstream media too, like if we can do like future of work in DAOs and future of work, I think people will start taking interest. I've seen that from my own personal experience. Like whenever I start conversations with DAOs, they're far more eager to hear me than when I say crypto.
Yeah, definitely. Get some of the bad crypto news out of people's mind and bring in some of the good stuff that we're doing. But I'll let someone else jump in.
I have to jump in a few minutes. I'll just hop in and give my quick blurb. I think first of all, we should probably stop calling them decentralized autonomous organizations. It means nothing to most people, and it's really hard to break down into one definition, like we've all discussed.
Definitely.
And generally just having like a quick onboarding pipeline, and that does start with education, because we all know how to get a job in the traditional tech world or even banking, whatever. You do an interview, you get chosen and all of that. I think the onboarding experience is very confusing for a lot of people, especially because it's internet native. So having a typical onboarding flow for what a DAO would be and educating that. But yeah, I mean, if we want to onboard 1 million people and more, we can't just keep calling it this long strung out name because it scares people. And that is probably honestly one of the biggest impediments.
Yeah, I think we're on our way with internet native organizations or just, internet organizations. And we're working towards there. But Justice, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that and this sounds crazy, I know, but I think we need to reposition, I'll use the word DAO, reposition DAOs as a complement and not a contradiction to traditional business. And that is paint a picture and tell a story. What does it mean for startups to use on-chain coordination mechanisms? That's not the stereotype of efficient way to waste money, right? And the same thing for enterprises and Web2 companies. They're dipping their toes in the water on like collectibles and stuff. It's like, how do they leverage on-chain coordination mechanisms to further engage their users with these mechanisms? And so users now have private access. Now they have voice on how things are done with early access to products. And then finally, they even have a say on how some subset of resources is spent as far as a few, that engages them. And so that's why I'm bullish on DAOs for startups and enterprises. I don't know if we'll call them DAOs yet, still maybe DAX, DOs, maybe just DAO will be consumed into DevOps, which I think is compelling as well.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Shannon, wrap us up here.
Yeah, I think it's in the messaging too, because I do think that there is an opportunity to really create community and kind of these coordination games between people who are like-minded and want to see missions, especially in the impact space, come together. And so I feel like a little bit less on, like Deepa was saying, that crypto heavy side of things, even though that is the conduit to allowing these projects to be funded. It's more of like what is the work that they're doing and how does that benefit kind of the greater space? And I feel like community is really at the core of that.
Perfect. No, that is great. I agree completely. We need to spread the good word of all the great stuff that people are doing with these organizations and how they're using the tools to benefit us and gain adoption globally, right? And just really get impressive people in these organizations from around the world that you can't do with a local regular organization, right? And people that don't have that benefits. But with that, I guess it's a good way to wrap up our panel on DAOs. I want to thank all of you for joining and really giving your time to educate the CBC community on DAOs and the future of DAOs and where we see it. I hope everyone that's here with us today learned a little bit something. And yeah, thanks guys. Really appreciate it. And it was a pleasure to chat with you. So see you guys.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Bye.